So we're here to talk about Poltergeist and RSPK. So what this means? Poltergeist is coming from the German word poltern, which means making noise, and Geist, like a spirit. But spirit is defined as human spirit or as the one in the spirit tradition. So it's an open definition, I would say. And that's why I like this word. RSPK, which is for recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, is more a physical approach linked to the fact that we are looking after about poltergeist agents. We will see that after. So let's start for the first question: is why is this conference? In fact, I was a personal witness of poltergeist in 1983, and I did some investigation at that time. And just to go with the, I would say, the presidential address SSE from William Manston, he says that you have to look at theory, data, but experience and practical. So I will just look at the experience for you. I am not the practical at time. So you are hearing the noise coming from the bedpost. The push your volume is needed. Okay, so that's just an introduction. It was a real recording of the noise, and we make some treatment, but I don't have time today to work on that. So next step is I work since 2014 with a private lab in France on the micro-PK, and we did some experiment, have some results we'll present tomorrow. And so coming from that, I wanted to enlarge the research, and I make a documentary and opposite work on micro-PK globally, so looking at poltergeist, RSPK, physical mediumships, and mystics, mainly levitation. So it's why I'm coming with the talk today and focus on the poltergeist part. So what we hear about RAPs just 1 minute before. Other example of poltergeist. Here we are in the US in 2014, in Bottle House, and all the house and all the office of the house is upside down, and with graffiti on the wall, with men upside down, and with here it's a scissor stabbed into the wall. Another example in Belgium, we see that all the furniture are also upside down. So this as example. And if we go further, we can see the kind of type of event we could find in poltergeist. So we saw telekinesis. We could see teleportation with passage through an obstacle. Levitation, many people throw out of their bed, so it's close to levitation, but maybe not only. Sounds, we heard about raps. There is also voice, imitative voice. There is also apport materialization, mainly like you see stone shower. You can see graffiti on the wall, which is here already. Spontaneous fire and instantaneous combustion. Cut air, stigmata. Smell, footprints, and more recently, electrical disturbance. So light going on and off, TV, energy power deviation, luminous effects, and also phone call, triggering, and text messaging. So you see it's many different type of events, and we'll go further from this. So what's going on in the past? If we look back in the past, the first, I would say, mention of something like poltergeist was by Hipponicus, 400 before Christ. He joked about an evil spirit who will have seized his table. Also at more at the Caesar period, so in 100 around, there was a case of a person who was being thrown out of bed. And the more known story is the one of the Pliny Nugent, who writes a letter called The Haunted House in Athens. We explain the story of the philosopher Athenodor, who wanted to confront a ghost in a house, and he stays the night and he decides to don't be afraid. And finally, the ghost moved outside and he followed him. and he showed him a place, and he disappeared. And then when he digs the next day with some people, he put some bones, and so he decides they make a proper burial, and after that the ghost disappears. And it's at that time, another time, it was classic stories. Also story in a bath in Caronea, where there is some noise and grunts, and finally they wall the bath in 100. So you see there is some story moving from the past. And what are the different interpretations? So as we have seen before, the dead person returning for burial, or proper burial. We have also some people thinking that it was an annunciation of the death. And after, in the Middle Age, we move on the goblin, elf, dwarf, domestic spirits, which were either positive or negative. And then moving forward in the time, we move more about demons, so more negatives. And finally, with witch and witch casting a spell and so on. Now, what is the current trends? It's more to say that some people are at the center of the phenomena, so what we call poltergeist agents, and what called Dr. Schwentnotzing called that spook medium. At that time, they were working about mediumship, physical mediumship, and also RSPK, as we already discussed. And the trend also is to decide whether we have to cut between the haunting phenomena, we are more subjective, and poltergeist phenomena, we are more objective with physical effect. We can talk about the work of Juan Lucadou in SSE-PA, the Freiburg approach, with the pragmatic modern information. We try to explain why the poltergeist phenomena and other psi phenomena are really elusive. And then we have Roll, who has worked on many cases and put in place what he calls the decline effect. So he look at the people at the center of the poltergeist and say that more you go outside of far from these people, and less you have phenomenon. Then other people work on all the electromagnetic and physical effects around poltergeist, and with a multidisciplinary approach like James Curran. And at now, I think we have in a way new models in their infancy, like concerning the consciousness, concerning the universe. And in the same time, we have some new effect of the poltergeist, so that maybe there is some contagion or attachment. And so we are in a process to move forward in the theory. But I think that we really have to come back to the fact, and that's what I want to show you today. So, big screen, sorry for that. Step one in the story, it's a case collection. So it was, I would say, sorry, it's around 860 to 1970. So many people in France, so you have Jules Mirville and Camille Flammarion, who put in place some case like 100 in Camille Flammarion. In Germany, Pulse, who show 100 cases. People in UK, William Barrett, again, Germany with Rainer Pepper. In Italy, Ernest Bonzano, which we talk about 500 cases. And Fanny Moser again in Germany. And then we move in UK with 36 cases with Thurston. Then some geophysical theory with Lambert, which was confronted by Gold and Cornell. And then we have the first comparative analysis done by William Cox, about 46 cases, mainly US and UK. Emile Tizane, which was a police commandant in France, and which was informed of poltergeist and make 40 new case studies. And we could talk also about George Zorab's comparative analysis, wanted to make more European, continental European case with 20 cases. So the fact that all this work was done and the poltergeists are taken very seriously is the fact that at the Presidential Convention in 1969, done by Hans Bender, he talked about poltergeist phenomenon and present 6 cases investigated by IGPP, 6 cases that we'll see more in detail later. So now the step 2 was the main quantitative studies about the poltergeist. So it was between until 2000, And the main actors was war in US. We work with the Psychical Research Foundation and make a study about 116 cases. Then we have in UK Alan Gould and Cornell. We make a study, done a study of 500 cases and put that in a book. And I will talk that later. Also, Michael Goss, we make a study about how much reference we have about poltergeists, books, article. We arrive at 1100 in 1980. And then we have some other work done by Guillaume Pfeffer, who work also in South America. Laryod Auerbach, we make a global book about poltergeist and haunting. Von Lucadou, we talked about it before, about his model of pragmatic information. And then again in Germany, Human and Schriebler work on 54 cases in Germany and compare it with the 116 cases of war and with the 500 cases of gold. Then we have Massimo Bondi in Italy. We study about 260 cases. So this is a really big work. And from 2000 until now, we are less intense, but more qualitative, I would say. So some work in France, work by Pascal Catella and Claude Lecouteux. There is work we already talk about the work of James Horan. Darren Ritson in UK with a very interesting case of the South Shield poltergeist. Michael Clarkson will make a very good book with we talk about 46 cases and a comparison. And also coming from Australia, we have 52 poltergeist cases which are described by Tony Hiller and Paul Cropper. And finally, a global synthesis by Barney Williams and Annalisa Ventura. And a recent book, like the one of Kesslinder about his own case, Hotel House. John Fraser, Gerard Meyer in Germany, who make a book about anomalies and include poltergeist in the anomalous. And Mallory Clement in France. So much work. And if we try to make a quantitative analysis of how much cases are identified and documented, I just take the basis of 500 of the Gould and Cornell books, and I look other authors and just subtract the one which are already in Gould studies, and we arrive around, it's a rough approach, more than 2,000 cases. And my estimate is that we have 700 cases with good documentation. So the idea is to say, okay, but how we can make a study about the evolution of the number of cases by countries, by period, and so forth. I start from the base of Alan Gould and Cornell, 500 cases, because first they were very consistent. Inside there were 140 cases where they linked to a report in a journal with a lecture committee. For each case we have an evaluation of the level of testimony and the level of detail. And so it was an interesting start. And we use that, digitalize that, and so we can make a study about segmentation by period, by geography, as we can see later. So the first result is positioning of the different case, poltergeist case. So the only point is that the base is mainly Europe and US. There is 46 countries in the database, but in fact many countries have only one case, but we'll see. So this is Europe, this is the US, normal because US comes after, and we are moving from 530, the year 530. Then we have what's in Asia and in Africa, so less case, but some, and in South America, some case here and here. So if we look at the case by country, we see that there is a strong tropism of UK. The study is coming from UK, okay. And also, so now if we look to the total number of cases per period, so we split the period between the Middle Age, modern era, first modern era, I would say, and then we make a special period starting in 1847, so the year of the Fox Sisters, and so the spirit wave in the US and Europe with all the mediumship interest, and then which decreased in 1940, and then another period here. So if we look per year, because this is the number of years per period are not the same. So if you look per year, we see that we move from 1 case per year to 2.5 during this wave spirit, and we decrease here, but we are at 2. And my estimate is that until 2010 we are at 2.3. So because we have 140 cases in 60 years. So globally we are at 2 cases per year documented. If we look to the trend of testimonial, so what is the testimonial level? It's the way to measure the credibility of the case. So if we are one, we have just an assembly of distant second-hand testimony. When you say distance, it's distance in the time. So for example, it's reported 50 years after the fact. And if we are 10, we have a continuous instrumental recording by a different person. And I have no case with 10. Level of detail, low, 1. And at 5, we have a diary. You have really a 5-minute tracking of events. So you see that the testimonial, level of testimonial are growing with the period, which is good. Then if we look to the investigation, so what we call investigator, or what Gold and Purnell called investigator, it's a moderate outside observer, so police, clergy, parapsychologist, and in some cases, some internal person, relatively detached and competent. And if you look to the period, you see that the investigation is moving up because it's a percentage, the percentage of cases who have investigation. And you see that the fraud, the hoax, which was detected, are closely the same on the period, which is good news. Even if I move up the investigation, I not so much fraud. Now, as we are talking about poltergeist and not haunting, but a mix of two, you can see that we have 50% here of nocturnal event and 40% of diurnal movement event. So we are not speaking about haunting during the night here. We have a global 500 case mixing the different events. On the 500 case, there is 40% which are with agent identified, what we call poltergeist agent. 12% which say that it's a center around the house or a place, and 50% which are not identified. That's important because if we look to the evolution around the year, so more and more identified agent percentage. So it shows that more and more we investigate, more and more we are able to detect some agent. But even with that, we clearly have 40% which are not defined, and we have a decrease of center house. So you know, the haunted house, the image of haunted house was decreasing with the time. About the age of agent, here you have the agent, sorry it's in French, but less than 20 years, and the agents older than 20 years. So you can see that we have more agent because the explanation was typical poltergeist agent is a child in the puberty area, either male and female, and we'll see this fact. At this period, it was really focused on saying that it was mainly female, and now we are moving up. Here, it's more close to 30 to 20%. I have not done the last graphic from now, but we'll see. The important thing now to look at is what are the phenomenal components during the historical period. How do they behave? So, for example, if we look to raps, we have an increase here. So, just to come back to the graphics, so here each period of the color. Okay. And so we are looking for each component and each period. So for wraps, we have a decrease after this. Maybe because, I don't know, but maybe one good explanation, maybe it's the structure of house are different and the furniture also. We here, so small object zone, we could say that we are in the same area. Same thing for larger object zone, except the first, which has less information. Object carry, we are in the same range. Apports, we are in the same range, and object hot also. So what is important to say is that, for example, you could say, yes, okay, in some 200 years, they were speaking about apport, about object carry, but that was just because the dream, the myths, and so forth. The fact that we have the same level here is the fact that maybe these things are not just stories, old stories. Component phenomena, if you look to luminous effects, so we have a decrease here, maybe because we are moving from a candle to electrical light, and there is some impact. Incendiary effect, this decrease, maybe because before there was much hoax incendiary, I would say. Inundation, I think we are more, maybe more aware about some space of water which are not a global inundation, but just some space of water in the house. And electrical equipment, sure, we don't have electrical equipment before, so it's normal, it's like that. If we look to other components, so bedclothes disturb, assault, possession, so close the same, I would say. Possession, here we have a decrease, and even here, because here it's 0. And it's normal because we saw that we move from demon for other explanation. And levitation, I think it's because, yes, people thrown out of bed. It's not really, people don't look really at levitation because we think about the levitation of mystics or maybe some physical medium. So now we saw this component, so we saw that globally it's pretty stable, except some evolution either in the environment, either in some belief. Another point of view, interesting, is to use the level of testimonial and ask if I increase the level of testimonial, do I have some component which decrease? So because if I have more investigation, maybe some are disappearing. So we work with testimonial more than 4 versus testimonial 4 and below. And so there is 187 cases here and 311 cases. So as you can see, in fact, the level here are higher than the level here. So the bizarre phenomena are better documented when the testimony index is higher. So that's important. It could be because the fact that because there is investigation, we are more looking to the detail and we see that. But the good point is that when we go in the detail, these things are remaining. So we can't say it's just an artifact around. We can't say poltergeist is only wraps and moving of objects. All these phenomena are inside it. And you can see that house-centered is in the reverse approach, because more and more we go into detail and more we are fixed with the haunting house. About cross-cultural aspect, if we take the first 10 countries, number of cases, and we look how it works about some typical components, we could see that we have curves are very close, except in India, and so close. So it says that there is no big difference between Germany, Canada, Scotland, for example, for the percentage of small objects, even if you look to Italy and UK and France. But you have a move in India. I would say that what is important to look is apport. On the apport side, we have really more in India because we are at 20 and we move at 50, 60%. So maybe it's because in India, apport is part of the culture. It's not a huge gap of belief, more than in European country. And so in our country, maybe we decrease the level of apport, and India, we increase, push it. And we could, sorry, here, and oops, okay. And large object, maybe also it's because environment, because it was the main most of the document are from small house, and maybe also the walls are not done the same way, so you have not the same wrap numbers, etc. But globally, we could see that around the country, those things are common, except maybe for India, and talk about it, about the belief and the environment. About the level of testimonial, very quickly, we could say that it's close to the same, except maybe there is more better testimonial in US and UK. I think because of the strong investigation approach done there. About the duration of case, Huisman and Shriver make a study of 54 cases, and they find that here we have the months. So the poltergeist would have a duration of 1 month, 24%, sorry, and decrease, and 24%, 24 months, you have around 8%. And if we compare to the our gold database, we are at the same level, 44% for the 1 month duration. We are close to the same here, around 10%. And then we have the difference here because we have 20% of cases which are 24 months duration and plus. It's concerned only 389 cases because it's only this case we have information of duration. Okay, so now we look at the number of incidents. So we are speaking of cases, we are working on, we say that we have more than 2,000 cases, but how many incidents inside the case we have? If we look to some typical case like the one of Miami, which is very known, done in Florida by Roll and Pratt. They work inside a warehouse, and they make a report of all the movement of object. You can see here. So the start of the object and the end of the move. So very detailed, very scrutiny analyzed. And they have 224 incidents. If we look to Rosenheim, which is a very known case, we are at 150 components. If we look to Elena Zugun, which Romania poltergeist, but it's really a center poltergeist. We look about 3,000 incidents, but Peter Mullaz talks that there is at least 800 documented incidents. So if we just take a rough cut of 50 incidents per case, which is lower than all these cases, we arrive at 35,000 incidents. So if we just make a quick probability calculation, let's say that we make a hypothesis about the probability that the testimonial is non-valid, sorry. So for example, we say 50% of false testimony, global approach, 40% of false perception, and 20% because some magic trick, some hoax. We arrive at 75% of testimonial invalid. With this in hypothesis, if we have 500 independent events, so we have 35,000, so 500 independent, so because independent actors, if you compute this, you have a probability that all these hypotheses are invalid of 3.510 exponential minus 63. So roughly 60 behind the zero. And if we are more stronger and say that we have only 90%, only 5% are good, so 95% of testimonials are bad, because we move at 60% the perception error. We arrive at 12.0. So it's just a simple calculation. I don't want to work to talk more about this because we are about proof oriented, and I prefer to work on the process oriented. But just to a quick view of that. So let's move on more the qualitative approach. If we look the main components, for example, teleportation, materialization, we have really important testimony. For example, in Waschendorf, tools enclosed in a box, and the mom sitting on the box, and the tools appear in the different place of the house. In Dortmund, more than 700 stones were arriving at port, and with 147 broken windows, no injured person. And in Neudorf, there are a rain of nails that repeats 16 times in 45 minutes, and the nails coming from a clocked cabinet in the basement. If we look to Nickenheim, which was investigated by Hans Bender, the object was always coming out of the house, so they make a test, did a test. They put bottles of perfume and pills on a table inside the house. They get out of the house, close all the doors, close all the shutters, and then they saw the bottles coming out of the roof in a zigzag movement down to the ground. I just want to read, and also if we look to Manayup, it's an Australian case. They have a pumpkin-sized stone weighing 30 pounds, which landing slowly on a still water reservoir. And in the same case, one witness, I just get the phrase, the sentence, I think it's nice. They say, looking at a clear grey sky, a small object taken shape. The materialization process was a bit like a kaleidoscope. A few jerks on one side and the other, and it was there. The stone fell on the roof, and once recovered, was very hot. So we find many things in the report, which are very interesting. The last one is Tucson, Arizona. There were 70 episodes of stone throwing mainly at the arrival of the night. At point that when they went out, at that time they put a helmet. It's not a joke. And when people coming visit them, they get them recovered with shade. About weird movement, typically stone which turn at right angle to avoid obstacle. Also, for example, in Nottingham in UK, the first stone make a hole in the window, and then all the stone go through the same hole. And the problem is that if you evaluate the distance used to send the stone, it was 150 feet. In Huptidu, a beer mug was passed the same thing at the nearest millimeter in a hole in the window. And you have something also about return objects. For example, in Canada, market balls put in a bag in the river that returns, and it was in 1829. And if you look in Java in 1833, stone marked with a cross of line and thrown in the torrents, and the stones come back with the sign and wet with water. So what is interesting is that these two cases are very close, but they are at the same place, but they are in Canada and Java. And at that time, I don't think that people are reading some SPA reports or leaking on the internet about poltergeist. So they have no information between them, and they report the same kind of thing. Also, I have to go, I think, quicker. Other point, there is a notion of frequent flyer. So objects in the house, some objects are moving, others are not. Also, there are areas, also some focus area. Also, what is interesting, if you look at the detail, you see that there is inconsistency between sound and impact. So some objects are coming on a roll, maybe a small object, and you have a big bang, like it was a Boeing going through the house. There is also inconsistency between the forcible impact speed and the injury cause. So objects are coming very fast on the witness, and at last they don't have injuries. Sometimes they stop sharply and fall vertically without bouncing. So my point here is to say that we see in the detailed documentation that many things are outside of the physics law today. There is some intelligent arrangement of objects. For example, here, it's in Australia, in Huptidu. little stone make the form of letters to form the car words, and they have all these words appearing in the house. You find also the die and pig camera, and this is the last point of this. It's a system is something looking at it was avoiding camera, and for example, they make some move at millisecond, which gives the impression that you can't see the anomalous object. So intelligence at work is the last chapter. We talk about frequent avoiding injury. We could talk about communication. So there is some answer with wraps. So the number of wraps correspond to the answer you want. And the question could be done by voice, by sometime by thoughts, and sometimes by figure in hand, hidden. Voice imitation in different language. Optimized movement, we already talked it. Also important is now moving up with the use of technology. So using the same approach that remote control, TV, door opening, car. You have a phone and mobile phone. You have some spontaneous phone call. For example, in Rosenheim, there was 100 call to the speaking clock, and there was only one phone control. And also message and text messaging. That's new for the new case. I think about the source field case. Electronic disturbance, light on off, power deviation, 50 amperes in the Rosenheim case. And when we speak about avoiding of camera, it's power cut, it's drained battery, file erasing. And last but not least, the complex emotion. I think it's important to say that we know now that the main trigger of the poltergeist is the emotion, mainly anger or fear. And it looked like the poltergeist show part of emotion, like he was able to joke, to have some humor, or anger and revenge, or tricky or manipulative. So when I say manipulative, it's, for example, he could make an event that in fact could trigger a bad emotion in the people around. So if he can feed off emotion, I don't know, but just a hypothesis. So conclusion, poltergeists have to be taken seriously to help define model of reality. The detailed analysis of weird poltergeist phenomena, and I list with a number of cases, completed by the one reported in physical mediumship and mystics, I speak about levitation mainly, could give some tools to analyze the pertinence of such or such theory. And on our side, for the research, we are making a clustering work following the one of Hussman, Shriver, and the one of Gold and Cornell to elaborate the category in the poltergeist and look at what kind of parameters could be regrouped. We continue to work on the poltergeist repository, and this repository could link to other databases in different areas of country of the world. We think that we really have to enhance case collection process. We discussed with many organizations about that already. And we make detailed study about the weird component, thanks to the big documentation available I showed you. And the idea is to compare this with the existing theory and make a proposal. And to finish, I would come with David Hume, philosopher, Scottish philosopher, who said, "No testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle, unless the testimony be of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish." So thank you very much for your attention.
This is wonderful. I love that you document and really look at the phenomena and quantify the phenomena so that it provides some data for further people who might want to look and see how theories apply. Able to look at the phenomena without applying a theory on top of it first. It's very wonderful that you gathered this information.